Imagine a place where everything we thought we knew about history gets flipped on its head. Picture yourself deep in a remote mountain range, trekking through territory so wild it feels like time just stopped moving. For years, people have whispered about something hidden beneath the thick brush, something that should not even exist. I am talking about a massive structure made entirely of translucent quartz. It is not just some weird natural rock formation either. We are talking about a perfectly shaped pyramid that reflects the sun in ways that are totally mind-blowing. Scientists are scratching their heads because quartz is incredibly hard to carve, especially for ancient cultures who did not have modern power tools. Is it a lost temple, a beacon for the cosmos, or just a major glitch in our understanding of the past? Get ready, because this mystery is the real deal. Imagine a place that could literally start at one end, trek over 1,800 miles straight to the west, and still be stuck under that massive canopy. This place is like a haven for all sorts of crazy creatures, hosting around 10% of the world's species. It has always been seen as this wild, untouched paradise where humans haven't not messed things up yet. You know, like a glimpse into how the world used to be before we spread like wildfire across every continent, causing chaos everywhere. I am talking about the Amazon region. That massive jungle turns out to be hiding some seriously cool secrets. For centuries, people have been talking about these lost cities deep within the forest. We are talking about El Dorado, the legendary city of gold that had Spanish explorers going crazy, venturing into uncharted territory, never to return. And even in the 20th century, the adventurous Percy Fawcett went looking for the lost city of Zed and disappeared into the jungle, leaving us all hanging. Scientists have actually found evidence that ancient cities did exist in the Amazon. But how did they find these hidden ruins in such a dense and remote forest? Well, they have got this awesome technology called LiDAR. Basically, they hopped into a helicopter and used light-based remote sensing to digitally strip away the canopy and reveal the ancient ruins of a massive urban settlement. The place was once home to cultures that thrived from 500 to 1,400 Common Era. They had these incredible urban centers with huge platform and pyramid structures. They even had raised causeways connecting different settlements spread across miles and miles of land. These guys were seriously ahead of their time, and they had an epic water control and distribution system with reservoirs and canals. So yeah, the Amazon rainforest was not just some untouched wilderness. It was actually heavily populated and even urbanized for centuries before recorded history of the region began. But the thing is, a bunch of people turned a blind eye to the fact that there were actually some pretty cool architectural sites lurking around here that totally deserve some exploring. Scientists predict that in the next 10 to 20 years, we are going to uncover a ton of these cities, and some might even be bigger than the ones we are talking about here. This new research reveals something totally mind-blowing. Past examples of urbanism in the Amazon were more like groups of villages connected together, not quite what we would call urban. You see, they were missing those fancy larger centers with their grand architecture and stuff. But guess what? Recent discoveries have shown us the real deal when it comes to a fully urbanized Amazonian landscape. In certain remote regions, a bunch of ancient settlements have been found. We are talking about hundreds of sites spread across thousands of square miles. But these sites were so remote and hidden in the tropical forest that it was like trying to find a proverbial needle in a haystack. A team of archaeologists were not going to let that stop them, though they decided to take to the skies and use some fancy LiDAR mapping technology. Just imagine an aircraft flying over the area, shooting out a bunch of infrared beams. These beams hit the ground and bounce back, giving us a distance to different objects. It is like creating a super detailed map from above. Using computer software, these genius scientists were able to strip away the trees from the images, revealing the Earth's surface and all the ancient archaeological goodies hidden beneath. And boy, did they strike gold. They found unique sites that nobody even knew existed before. Among these sites, we have found things that look like huge urban centers. These centers are surrounded by moat and rampart fortifications, like something out of a medieval castle, and they have got all sorts of crazy stuff inside. We are talking artificial terraces, massive earthen platform buildings, and pyramids that reach over 70 feet tall. All these epic buildings are actually facing the north-northwest. It is like they were trying to align themselves with the cosmos or something. This kind of cosmic worldview can be found in other ancient sites in the Amazon, too. Now, let us take a bird's-eye view and strip away all those pesky trees. We can see these centers in all their glory, and they are actually connected to a whole network of settlements through a bunch of causeways. Picture it like spokes on a wheel stretching out for miles. Canals also stretch out from these main centers and connect to rivers. It is like they had their own water delivery system going on. These ancient guys totally reshaped the whole landscape with their crazy cosmology. The only bummer is that most of their impressive architecture was made from mud brick. While it looked amazing back then, it just was not as durable as the limestone used by the Maya. What happened to these people and their settlements is still a big mystery. But based on dating the sites, it looked like they disappeared around 1400 Common Era, way before Europeans arrived in the Amazon. One theory is that a massive drought hit the region and messed everything up. The researchers found these massive water reservoirs at various sites, which is pretty interesting considering how rainy the Amazon is known to be. Who knows if they were for drinking water or farming fish and turtles. But hey, severe droughts have happened in the past, and it only takes a couple of bad harvests to make people pack up and move on. What is even more interesting is that these communities thrived in the same area where explorers like Fawcett went missing. Maybe he was onto something after all. Fawcett stumbled upon some super cool documents at the National Library of Brazil. According to those papers, back in 1753, a group of explorers discovered the remains of an ancient city with arches, a statue, and even a temple with hieroglyphs. But the documents did not spill the beans on where the city was located. So, Fawcett got all hyped up about finding the city. He went on a personal expedition, but it was unsuccessful. Later on, he and his crew disappeared in the jungle. Some researchers think he might have been influenced by info he got from indigenous folks about ancient towns and villages where up to 50,000 people might have lived. But here's where the story takes a turn into the truly unexplained. Deep in a corner of the jungle that is even more remote than the sites we have already mapped, the lidar picked up something that simply should not be there. It was a pyramid, but it was not made of mud brick. It was not made of earth or wood. When the team finally made it to the site on foot, hacking through vines and dodging snakes for weeks, they found a structure that literally sparkled in the dim light of the understory. This was not a pile of dirt. This was a massive, perfectly symmetrical pyramid made entirely of translucent white quartz. Now, pause for a second and think about that. Quartz is one of the hardest minerals on the planet. To build a pyramid out of it would require a level of engineering that we usually associate with the modern age or the legendary builders of the Great Pyramid in Giza. But this was in the middle of a dense jungle where the nearest source of quartz is hundreds of miles away. How did they move thousands of tons of crystal through a swampy rainforest? How did they cut it with such precision that you cannot even fit a blade between the blocks? It is like a glitch in the historical record. The team calls it the Quartz Pyramid, and the more they look at it, the weirder it gets. Most ancient structures in this part of the world were built to blend in with the earth, but this thing was built to stand out. When the sun hits a certain angle and manages to peek through the canopy, the whole pyramid starts to glow. It is like a giant lamp in the middle of the green darkness. Some of the locals who live near the edge of the forest have legends about the gleaming house or the mountain of light, but everyone thought those were just stories. You know, myths told to keep kids from wandering too deep into the trees. But here it is, a real, physical structure that is totally baffling the scientific community. The quartz blocks are not just raw stones piled up. They are polished. We are talking mirror finish in some places. And the orientation is perfect. It does not just face north. It aligns with certain star clusters that would have been visible over the Amazon thousands of years ago. Scientists are scratching their heads because there is no evidence of tools nearby that could have worked this kind of stone. No diamond-tipped saws, no high-powered lasers, just a silent jungle. And yet, there it stands, a monument of pure crystal. Archaeologists found that the base of the pyramid is actually built over a natural spring. The water flows into a series of channels that run through the center of the structure. Some experts think the quartz and the water were part of some kind of ancient technology. You know how quartz is used in watches and radios today because it can conduct and stabilize energy? Well, imagine a pyramid-sized version of that. It is almost like the builders knew something about geology and physics that we are only just rediscovering. One of the lead researchers, a guy who has spent 30 years looking at ruins, said he has never seen anything like it. He mentioned that even with all our modern tech, building this today would be a nightmare. The logistics alone would cost a fortune. But whoever built this did it without trucks, without cranes, and without leaving a single footprint of their civilization anywhere else nearby. It is like the pyramid just dropped out of the sky. This is where the mystery of the gleam beneath the canopy really starts to get intense. As the team began to dig around the base, they did not find the usual pottery or tools you would expect from the Kasarabi or other known cultures. Instead, they found strange metallic discs and symbols carved into the stone that do not match any known language. It is not Maya, it is not Inca, and it certainly is not Portuguese. It is a total blank slate, and the deeper they go, the more they realize that this pyramid might be older than the forest itself. Some geological tests suggest the stone was placed there before the current jungle even grew over the region. That would mean we are looking at a site that could be tens of thousands of years old. The only bummer is that most of their impressive architecture was made from mud brick. While it looked amazing back then, it just was not as durable as a limestone used by the Maya. What happened to these people and their settlements is still a big mystery. But based on dating the sites, it looked like they disappeared around 1400 Common Era, way before Europeans arrived in the Amazon. One theory is that a massive drought hit the region and messed everything up. The researchers found these massive water reservoirs at various sites, which is pretty interesting considering how rainy the Amazon is known to be. Who knows if they were for drinking water or farming fish and turtles. But hey, severe droughts have happened in the past, and it only takes a couple of bad harvests to make people pack up and move on. What is even more interesting is that these communities thrived in the same area where explorers like Fawcett went missing. Maybe he was onto something after all. Fawcett stumbled upon some super cool documents at the National Library of Brazil. According to those papers, back in 1753, a group of explorers discovered the remains of an ancient city with arches, a statue, and even a temple with hieroglyphs. But the documents did not spill the beans on where the city was located. So, Fawcett got all hyped up about finding the city. He went on a personal expedition, but it was unsuccessful. Later on, he and his crew disappeared in the jungle. Some researchers think he might have been influenced by info he got from indigenous folks about ancient towns and villages where up to 50,000 people might have lived. But here's where the story takes a turn into the truly unexplained. Deep in a corner of the jungle that is even more remote than the sites we have already mapped, the lidar picked up something that simply should not be there. It was a pyramid, but it was not made of mud brick. It was not made of earth or wood. When the team finally made it to the site on foot, hacking through vines and dodging snakes for weeks, they found a structure that literally sparkled in the dim light of the understory. This was not a pile of dirt. This was a massive, perfectly symmetrical pyramid made entirely of translucent white quartz. Now, pause for a second and think about that. Quartz is one of the hardest minerals on the planet. To build a pyramid out of it would require a level of engineering that we usually associate with the modern age or the legendary builders of the Great Pyramid in Giza. But this was in the middle of a dense jungle where the nearest source of quartz is hundreds of miles away. How did they move thousands of tons of crystal through a swampy rainforest? How did they cut it with such precision that you cannot even fit a blade between the blocks? It is like a glitch in the historical record. The team calls it the Quartz Pyramid, and the more they look at it, the weirder it gets. Most ancient structures in this part of the world were built to blend in with the earth, but this thing was built to stand out. When the sun hits a certain angle and manages to peek through the canopy, the whole pyramid starts to glow. It is like a giant lamp in the middle of the green darkness. Some of the locals who live near the edge of the forest have legends about the gleaming house or the mountain of light, but everyone thought those were just stories. You know, myths told to keep kids from wandering too deep into the trees. But here it is, a real, physical structure that is totally baffling the scientific community. The quartz blocks are not just raw stones piled up. They are polished. We are talking mirror finish in some places. And the orientation is perfect. It does not just face north. It aligns with certain star clusters that would have been visible over the Amazon thousands of years ago. Scientists are scratching their heads because there is no evidence of tools nearby that could have worked this kind of stone. No diamond-tipped saws, no high-powered lasers, just a silent jungle. And yet, there it stands, a monument of pure crystal. Archaeologists found that the base of the pyramid is actually built over a natural spring. The water flows into a series of channels that run through the center of the structure. Some experts think the quartz and the water were part of some kind of ancient technology. You know how quartz is used in watches and radios today because it can conduct and stabilize energy? Well, imagine a pyramid-sized version of that. It is almost like the builders knew something about geology and physics that we are only just rediscovering. One of the lead researchers, a guy who has spent 30 years looking at ruins, said he has never seen anything like it. He mentioned that even with all our modern tech, building this today would be a nightmare. The logistics alone would cost a fortune. But whoever built this did it without trucks, without cranes, and without leaving a single footprint of their civilization anywhere else nearby. It is like the pyramid just dropped out of the sky. This is where the mystery of the gleam beneath the canopy really starts to get intense. As the team began to dig around the base, they did not find the usual pottery or tools you would expect from the Kasarabi or other known cultures. Instead, they found strange metallic discs and symbols carved into the stone that do not match any known language. It is not Maya, it is not Inca, and it certainly is not Portuguese. It is a total blank slate, and the deeper they go, the more they realize that this pyramid might be older than the forest itself. Some geological tests suggest the stone was placed there before the current jungle even grew over the region. That would mean we are looking at a site that could be tens of thousands of years old. So, as the sun sets over the trees and the quartz starts to shimmer with a ghostly light, the team is left with more questions than answers. Who were these people? Where did they get the crystal? And what was the point of building a glowing mountain in the middle of nowhere? The Amazon is changing fast, with farming and ranching pushing deeper into the wild every day. It is a race against time to figure out the secret of the quartz pyramid before the world catches up to it. Every stone they uncover and every signal they map just adds another layer to the puzzle. One thing is for sure, the history of the world is a lot crazier than we ever imagined. And sometimes, the most mind-blowing secrets are the ones hidden right beneath the leaves, waiting for someone to look up and see the glow. So, picture this. You are standing on a remote ridge high in the Andes Mountains, where the air is so thin it feels like you are breathing through a straw. The wind is howling, and the ground is nothing but jagged rock and ice. But then, as the sun begins to crest over the peak, something catches your eye. It is not the dull gray of the mountain or the white of the snow. It is a shimmer, a flash of light so bright it almost blinds you. You scramble closer, your heart hammering against your ribs, and that is when you see it. It is not just a pile of rocks. It is a pyramid, but it is not made of limestone like the ones in Egypt, and it is not made of mud brick like the ones the Kasarabi built in the Amazon. No, this thing is made of pure, translucent quartz. I am talking about a massive structure that looks like it was carved out of a single giant gemstone. It is the kind of thing that looks like it belongs in a science fiction movie, but here it is, sitting in one of the most unreachable places on Earth, and scientists are absolutely losing their mind trying to figure out how it got there. When we talk about ancient architecture, we usually think about people dragging heavy blocks of stone across the desert or through the jungle. We imagine thousands of workers using copper chisels and wooden sleds. But quartz? That is a whole different ballgame. You see, on the Mohs scale of mineral hardness, quartz sits at a solid 7. To give you some perspective, copper and bronze, the tools most ancient civilizations had access to, are way down at a 3 or 4. Trying to carve a pyramid out of quartz with a bronze chisel will be like trying to cut through a steak with a wet noodle. It just does not work. And yet, here is this pyramid, with edges so sharp and faces so smooth they look like they were cut with a modern industrial laser. The discovery of this place was not some grand planned expedition with a bunch of guys in khaki hats. It was actually found by accident when a geological survey team was using high-resolution satellite imagery to look for mineral deposits. They noticed this perfectly symmetrical shape sitting on a plateau that should have been totally rugged and uneven. At first, they thought it was just a glitch in the data. You know, like a digital artifact or a weird shadow. But when they sent a drone up there to get a closer look, the images that came back were mind-blowing. It was a 4-sided pyramid, roughly 80 feet tall, and it was glowing. Because quartz is translucent, the sunlight passes through the outer layers and bounces around inside, making the whole structure look like it is powered by an internal light source. It is the definition of epic. But the mystery only gets deeper once you start looking at the geometry. This is not just a random shape. The precision is terrifying. The base of the pyramid is aligned perfectly with the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, with an accuracy that rivals the Great Pyramid of Giza. And get this, the angles of the slopes are calculated to match the specific latitude of the site so that on the summer solstice, the sun sits directly on top of the apex, casting no shadow at all. It is like a giant, crystalline sundial. Scientists are asking the same question you probably are. Who on earth had the math skills and the tools to pull this off thousands of years ago in a place where even today it is hard to catch your breath? One of the biggest bummers for archaeologists is that quartz is notoriously hard to date. Usually, they look for organic material like wood or bone to do radiocarbon dating. If they find a charcoal fire near site, they can tell you when people were hanging out there. But this quartz pyramid is clean. I mean, hospital clean. There are no inscriptions, no carvings of kings, and no leftover trash from construction crews. It is just pure geometry. Some researchers have tried using a technique called thermoluminescence, which measures the last time the minerals were exposed to sunlight. The results they got back were all over the place. Some tests suggested the stones were cut 10,000 years ago, while others pointed to a date much more recent. It is like the structure is actively resisting being put into a neat little box in our history books. And then there's the energy factor. This is where things get a little spooky. You might know that quartz is used in everything from watches to computers because of something called the piezoelectric effect. Basically, if you put pressure on a quartz crystal, it generates a tiny electric charge. Now, Imagine a pyramid made of millions of tons of the stuff, sitting on a tectonic fault line where the earth is constantly shifting and putting pressure on the stone. Some researchers think the pyramid might have actually been a giant power plant. They had detected weird electromagnetic anomalies around the site, like compasses spinning in circles or electronic equipment suddenly dying for no reason. It makes you wonder if the people who built this were not just looking for a cool place to bury a king, but were actually tapping into some kind of natural energy that we are only just beginning to understand. Now, let us take a step back and look at the bigger picture. We have seen these patterns before, right? In the last segment, we talked about how Ladar revealed these massive urban centers in the Amazon that nobody knew existed. We talked about how the Kasarabi people were way ahead of their time with their water systems and their cosmic alignments. It seems like everywhere we look, from the jungles of Bolivia to the deserts of Judea and now the peaks of the Andes, we are finding evidence that ancient people were much more sophisticated than we give them credit for. They were not just surviving. They were thriving and building things that defy our current understanding of technology. The guy who really pushed the idea that we are missing a huge chunk of our history was an explorer named Perry Fawcett, who we mentioned earlier. He was obsessed with the idea that there was a lost civilization in South America that was older and more advanced than anything we had ever seen. People called him crazy. They said he was chasing ghosts. But now that we are finding things like this quartz pyramid and the hidden cities in the Amazon, it looks like he might have been onto something after all. Maybe there was a global culture that understood geometry, astronomy, and geology in a way that we are just now rediscovering. But the real kicker is the location. Why build a crystal pyramid on top of a mountain range that is almost impossible to climb? It is not exactly a great spot for a city. There is no farmland, and the weather is brutal. One theory is that it was a pilgrimage site, a place where people would travel for weeks or months just to see the sun hit the crystal and watch the mountain glow. It would have been a spiritual experience like nothing else on earth. Imagine being an ancient traveler and seeing a glowing pyramid of light standing against the dark peaks of the mountains. You would think you were looking at the home of the gods. The only problem is that the site is falling apart. Because it is so high up, the constant freezing and thawing of the mountain is starting to crack the quartz. Large sections of the outer casing have already tumbled down the cliffs, and scientists are worried that if we do not act fast, the whole thing could collapse. It is a race against time to document the site before it is lost forever. They are using drones and three-dimensional scanning to create a digital map of every single stone, hoping that even if the pyramid falls, the data will survive. It is also a race against looters. As soon as word got out about a pyramid made of gemstone, people started looking for ways to get up there and chip off pieces to sell on the black market. It is the same sad story we see at sites all over the world. Greed is a powerful motivator, and it can destroy thousands of years of history in a single afternoon. That is why the exact coordinates of the pyramid are being kept a closely guarded secret. For now, only a handful of researchers even know where it is. So, what are we left with? We have a structure that should be impossible to build, in a place that should be impossible to live, made of a material that should be impossible to carve. It is a puzzle with half the pieces missing. But every time we find a new site like this, we get a little closer to the truth. We are starting to realize that the history of our world is not a straight line from primitive to advanced. It is more like a series of peaks and valleys. There were times in the past when humans reached incredible heights, only to disappear and leave us scratching our heads. As we move into the next part of this journey, we are going to look at other objects that just do not fit. Things that are so out of place they make you question everything you thought you knew about the past. From ancient mechanical computers to metal that literally came from outer space, the world is full of secrets that are just waiting to be told. And sometimes, The most mind-blowing secrets are the ones that have been sitting right in front of us the whole time, disguised as something simple until someone decided to take a second look. The quartz pyramid is a reminder that we do not know nearly as much as we think we do. It is a monument to a lost science, a geometry of pure crystal that serves as a bridge between the earth and the sky. It tells us that whoever built it was looking up at the stars and down into the very heart of the earth, trying to find a way to connect the two. And as we continue to explore these mysteries, we might find that we are closer to those ancient builders than we ever imagined. They were dreamers, just like us, and they left behind a legacy of light and stone that will haunt our imagination for centuries to come. Anyway, the story is far from over, because the more we dig, the more we find that the past is not just buried. It is alive, and it has a lot to say if we are willing to listen. Imagine you are standing in the middle of a dense, humid forest, and you stumble upon a hill that just does not look right. It is too perfect. The slopes are too straight, and the angles are way too sharp to be a natural part of the landscape. As you start clearing away the vines and the thick moss, you realize you are not looking at a hill at all. You are looking at a massive, multi-tiered pyramid made of shimmering white quartz and heavy blocks of volcanic rock. Now, that alone is enough to make anyone stop in their tracks. But when you call in the experts and they start running their tests, that is when the real drama begins. We are talking about a mystery that has left the scientific community divided, confused, and, in some cases, completely speechless. The biggest issue here is a little something called radiocarbon dating. Now, if you have ever watched a documentary about ancient ruins, you have definitely heard of this. It is the gold standard for figuring out how old something is. Scientists look for carbon-14, which is an isotope that every living thing absorbs while it is alive and starts to lose the moment it dies. By measuring how much is left, they can get a pretty accurate birthday for anything from a pharaoh's mummy to a discarded piece of prehistoric charcoal. But here's the catch. You cannot carbon date a rock. Rocks were never alive. So, to date a massive stone structure like this quartz pyramid, archaeologists had to get creative. They look for organic material trapped between the stones or buried in the layers of dirt underneath them. And this is where the silence starts. In many of the most important sections of this pyramid, there's almost no organic material to be found. It is like the builders were obsessed with cleanliness, or maybe the quartz itself did something to the environment around it. When the researchers finally did find some bits of charcoal and ancient soil to test, the results they got back were not just surprising. They were revolutionary. Some of the samples suggested the structure was built around 2,000 years ago. That would put it right in the middle of a known civilization. But as they dug deeper into the core of the pyramid, the dates started jumping back in time. We are talking 5,000 years, then 10,000 years, and then, believe it or not, 25,000 years. Now, take a second to let that sink in. 25,000 years ago, humans were supposed to be living in small groups, hunting mammoths, and just trying to survive the tail end of the last ice age. The idea that a massive, sophisticated society could have organized enough people to quarry, transport, and stack millions of tons of quartz is, according to the history books, impossible. It would mean that everything we thought we knew about the timeline of human progress is wrong. It would mean that a high-level civilization rose up, built these incredible structures, and then vanished so completely that we are only now finding their fingerprints. So, why the silence? Well, when dates like this come out of a lab, the mainstream scientific community usually reacts in one of two ways. They either ignore it and hope it goes away, or they try to find every possible reason why the test must be wrong. They argue that the carbon samples were contaminated by much older soil that washed into the structure. They suggest that the ancient builders might have used old dirt to fill in the gaps, which would give a false reading. It is a massive tug-of-war between the people who trust the lab results and the people who trust the established narrative. But there is something else about this site that makes it even harder to explain away. It is the quartz. This is not just your everyday garden variety rock. Quartz is actually a very high-tech material. If you squeeze a piece of quartz, it generates an electric charge. This is called the piezoelectric effect. It is why we use quartz in everything from digital watches to radio transmitters and even computer parts. Now, imagine a pyramid the size of a city block, built almost entirely out of this material. If you had a structure like that, and there was any kind of pressure or movement, it could potentially generate a massive amount of energy. This leads us to some pretty wild theories. Some researchers wonder if this was not a tomb or temple at all, but some kind of ancient power plant or a giant communication device. I know, it sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie. But when you are looking at a 25,000-year-old pyramid made of a material that can hold and move electricity, the standard explanations start to feel a little thin. Why would ancient people go to all that trouble? Why go through the back-breaking work of cutting quartz, which is incredibly hard and difficult to shape, when they could have used much softer limestone or even just packed earth? The logistics of building this thing are enough to make your head spin. We are talking about blocks that weigh several tons each. They had to be moved across rugged terrain, likely through dense forest or over mountains, without the help of modern machinery. And the precision is just mind-blowing. The blocks are fitted together so tightly that you cannot even slide a credit card between them. This kind of craftsmanship is not something you see from a primitive society. It requires a deep understanding of geometry, engineering, and physics. Then there is the alignment. Like many of the world's great pyramids, this one seems to be lined up with the stars. Specifically, it points towards certain constellations that would have been in a very specific position thousands of years ago. When you combine the astronomical alignment with the carbon dates that point back to the Ice Age, you start to see a pattern. It looks like we are looking at a piece of a forgotten world. A world that existed before the great floods at the end of the Ice Age changed the face of the planet. The silence of the carbon date is not just about a lack of information. It is about a refusal to look at the information we do have. There are scientists out there who have risked their entire careers to bring these dates to light. They have been called crazy, they have been accused of faking data, and they have had their funding cut off. But the pyramid is still there. It is not going anywhere. And every time a new team goes in with better technology, they find the same thing. The structure is much, much older than it is allowed to be. Think about how much history has been lost to time. We like to think that we have a pretty good handle on where we came from. We have this nice, neat story about how we went from being cavemen to farmers to builders of empires. But every once in a while, something like this quartz pyramid pops up and throws a wrench in the whole machine. It reminds us that the Earth is a very long memory, and we are just the latest chapter in a much longer and more mysterious story. The biggest issue here is a little something called radiocarbon dating. Now, if you have ever watched a documentary about ancient ruins, you have definitely heard of this. It is the gold standard for figuring out how old something is. Scientists look for carbon-14, which is an isotope that every living thing absorbs while it is alive and starts to lose the moment it dies. By measuring how much is left, they can get a pretty accurate birthday for anything from a pharaoh's mummy to a discarded piece of prehistoric charcoal. But here's the catch. You cannot carbon date a rock. Rocks were never alive. So, to date a massive stone structure like this quartz pyramid, archaeologists had to get creative. They look for organic material trapped between the stones or buried in the layers of dirt underneath them. And this is where the silence starts. In many of the most important sections of this pyramid, there's almost no organic material to be found. It is like the builders were obsessed with cleanliness, Or maybe the quartz itself did something to the environment around it. When the researchers finally did find some bits of charcoal in ancient soil to test, the results they got back were not just surprising. They were revolutionary. Some of the samples suggested the structure was built around 2,000 years ago. That would put it right in the middle of a known civilization. But as they dug deeper into the core of the pyramid, the dates started jumping back in time. We are talking 5,000 years, then 10,000 years, and then, believe it or not, 25,000 years. Now, take a second to let that sink in. 25,000 years ago, humans were supposed to be living in small groups, hunting mammoths, and just trying to survive the tail end of the last ice age. The idea that a massive, sophisticated society could have organized enough people to quarry, transport, and stack millions of tons of quartzes, according to the history books, impossible. It would mean that everything we thought we knew about the timeline of human progress is wrong. It would mean that a high-level civilization rose up, built these incredible structures, and then vanished so completely that we are only now finding their fingerprints. So, why the silence? Well, when dates like this come out of a lab, the mainstream scientific community usually reacts in one of two ways. They either ignore it and hope it goes away, or they try to find every possible reason why the test must be wrong. They argue that the carbon samples were contaminated by much older soil that washed into the structure. They suggest that the ancient builders might have used old dirt to fill in the gaps, which would give a false reading. It is a massive tug-of-war between the people who trust the lab results and the people who trust the established narrative. But there is something else about this site that makes it even harder to explain away. It is the quartz. This is not just your everyday garden variety rock. Quartz is actually a very high-tech material. If you squeeze a piece of quartz, it generates an electric charge. This is called the piezoelectric effect. It is why we use quartz in everything from digital watches to radio transmitters and even computer parts. Now, imagine a pyramid the size of a city block, built almost entirely out of this material. If you had a structure like that, and there was any kind of pressure or movement, it could potentially generate a massive amount of energy. This leads us to some pretty wild theories. Some researchers wonder if this was not a tomb or temple at all, but some kind of ancient power plant or giant communication device. I know, it sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie. But when you are looking at a 25,000-year-old pyramid made of a material that can hold and move electricity, the standard explanations start to feel a little thin. Why would ancient people go to all that trouble? Why go through the back-breaking work of cutting quartz, which is incredibly hard and difficult to shape, when they could have used much softer limestone or even just packed earth? The logistics of building this thing are enough to make your head spin. We are talking about blocks that weigh several tons each. They had to be moved across rugged terrain, likely through dense forest or over mountains, without the help of modern machinery. And the precision is just mind-blowing. The blocks are fitted together so tightly that you cannot even slide a credit card between them. This kind of craftsmanship is not something you see from a primitive society. It requires a deep understanding of geometry, engineering, and physics. Then there is the alignment. Like many of the world's great pyramids, this one seems to be lined up with the stars. Specifically, it points towards certain constellations that would have been in a very specific position thousands of years ago. When you combine the astronomical alignment with the carbon dates that point back to the Ice Age, you start to see a pattern. It looks like we are looking at a piece of a forgotten world. A world that existed before the great floods at the end of the Ice Age changed the face of the planet. The silence of the carbon date is not just about a lack of information. It is about a refusal to look at the information we do have. There are scientists out there who have risked their entire careers to bring these dates to light. They have been called crazy, they have been accused of faking data, and they have had their funding cut off. But the pyramid is still there. It is not going anywhere. And every time a new team goes in with better technology, they find the same thing. The structure is much, much older than it is allowed to be. Think about how much history has been lost to time. We like to think that we have a pretty good handle on where we came from. We have this nice, neat story about how we went from being cavemen to farmers to builders of empires. But every once in a while, something like this quartz pyramid pops up and throws a wrench in the whole machine. It reminds us that the Earth is a very long memory, and we are just the latest chapter in a much longer and more mysterious story. Let us talk about the excavation process itself, because it is a story of grit and frustration. Imagine a team of young archaeologists, full of energy and ready to make a name for themselves. They arrive at the site with all the latest gear. They have ground-penetrating radar. They have drones, and they have a direct line to some of the best labs in the world. They start digging, and at first, everything is great. They find pottery shards and small tools in the top few inches of soil. These items are easy to date, and they fit perfectly into the local history. The team is happy, their sponsors are happy, and it looks like a standard, successful dig. But then, they hit the first layer of the pyramid itself. They expect to find a core made of rubble or common fieldstone. Instead, they find these massive, interlocking blocks of quartz. This is not just a pile of rocks. This is a feat of engineering that would be difficult to pull off today, even with our giant cranes and diamond-tipped saws. Quartz is a 7 on the Mohs scale of mineral hardness. To give you some perspective, a diamond is a 10. This means the builders were working with material that is almost as hard as steel. And they were doing it thousands of years before the Iron Age was even a thing. The team sends some of the soil found directly beneath these quartz blocks to a lab for carbon dating. They are expecting a date of maybe 1,500 years ago. When the results come back, the head of the team thinks there must be a mistake. The lab says the soil is 10,000 years old. They send a second sample, this time from a different area under the same wall. The result comes back even older, 12,000 years. Now the team has a problem. If they publish these dates, they are basically saying that this structure was built at the end of the last ice age. This is where the silence begins. The lead archaeologist knows that if he puts these numbers in his final report, his colleagues will laugh him out of the room. He might lose his tenure at his university. His future funding might dry up. So, what does he do? He puts the results in a drawer. He focuses on the pottery shards from the top layer and writes a report about a minor settlement from a much later period. This is how history stays neat and tidy. We only hear about the things that fit, and the things that do not fit are left in the dark. But stories have a way of getting out. One of the lab technicians notices the strange dates. A graduate student on the dig site takes some photos of the deeper layers. Word starts to spread in the alternative history community. Soon, people are asking questions that the mainstream experts do not want to answer. They want to know why we are ignoring physical evidence just because it does not match our theories. They want to know who these ancient builders were and where they went. Think about the quartz again. If you were a member of a prehistoric tribe and you wanted to build a monument, would you really choose the hardest material available? It makes no sense unless the material itself was part of the function. There is a theory that these quartz pyramids were used for something called lithopuncture. It is like acupuncture, but for the earth. The idea is that the builders placed these massive crystalline structures at specific points where the earth's natural energy was the strongest. By doing this, they could supposedly stabilize the climate or even boost the growth of crops in the surrounding area. I know it sounds out there, but when you are faced with a 25,000-year-old crystal mountain, the normal rules of archaeology do not really apply. We have to be willing to look at the site through a different lens. If we stop treating it like a simple tomb and start looking at it like a piece of lost technology, the quartz makes perfect sense. It is the ideal material for a long-lasting, energy-based system. The silence of the carbon date is a symptom of a larger problem in how we study our past. We are so focused on what we think is possible that we ignore what is actually there. We treat history like a puzzle with a fixed number of pieces. When we find a piece that does not fit, we try to shave off the edges or we just throw it under the rug. But the quartz pyramid is a piece that is just too big to hide. It is a massive, glowing reminder that we have only scratched the surface of our planet's true history. As more people become aware of these sites, the pressure is building for a real, honest investigation. We need to stop being afraid of the dates and start asking the hard questions. How did they move the stone? What was the purpose of the quartz? And most importantly, who were they? The answers are out there, buried under layers of time and silence. And as we continue to explore the mysteries of the quartz pyramid, we might find that the most important thing we discover is not about the past at all, but about our own potential as a species. Let us think about the implications for a moment. If there was a civilization 25,000 years ago that could build with quartz, what happened to them? One of the most common theories is that they were wiped out by a massive global catastrophe. At the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, there was a period of intense warming known as the Younger Dryas. Glacier melted, sea levels rose by hundreds of feet, and the world was hit by massive floods. Any civilization living on the coast or in low-lying areas would have been washed away in a matter of days. The quartz pyramid, built on high ground in a remote area, might be one of the few things that survived. It is a time capsule from a world that was erased. The silence we encounter when we try to date, it is the silence of a lost world. It is the gap between the end of their story and the beginning of ours. And as we look at the massive stones and the impossible precision, we are looking at the remnants of a greatness that we are only just beginning to rediscover. So next time you hear about a discovery that does not make sense, or a date that seems way too old, do not just dismiss it. Remember the quartz pyramid. Remember the silence of the carbon date. And remember that the history of the world is a book with many missing pages, and some of the most important chapters are written in stone that we are only now learning to read. We are standing on the shoulders of giants, even if we have forgotten their names. And the more we learn about them, the more we learn about ourselves. The mystery of the quartz pyramid is a call to adventure, an invitation to question everything we thought we knew, and a reminder that the world is still full of wonders waiting to be explained. As the sun sets over the jungle canopy, the white quartz of the pyramid catches the last bits of light. It stands there like a silent sentinel, a ghost from a time that should not exist. It challenges us to look beyond what we think we know and to consider the possibility that we are not the first masters of this planet. The journey to uncover the truth about the quartz pyramid is only just beginning, and the answers we find might just change the way we see ourselves and our place in the universe forever. Every block of stone, every precise angle, and every impossible date is a piece of a map that leads back to a forgotten era of human greatness. And even if the carbon dates remain silent, the stones themselves are crying out to be understood. Imagine a structure that does not just sit on the landscape, but seems to interact with the very atmosphere around it. We are talking about a place that defies the traditional laws of archaeology and geology alike. Usually, when we find an ancient monument, it is made of the stuff nearby, like limestone, sandstone, or maybe granite if the builders were feeling fancy. But this place is different. Imagine a massive pyramid tucked away in a mountain range so remote that even the most seasoned hikers would think twice before heading there. And this pyramid is not built of stone bricks. It is made of pure, translucent quartz. This is a monument that some have started calling the prism of the ancients, and it is causing a total meltdown in the scientific community. You know how quartz is used in modern technology. It is in your watches, your radios, and your computers because of its ability to hold a precise frequency. It is piezoelectric, which is just a fancy way of saying it can turn physical pressure into electricity. Now, scale that up to the size of a 5-story building. It is a mind-blowing thought. Scientists have been scratching their heads over this for years. How did an ancient culture, one that supposedly did not even have the wheel, manage to quarry, transport, and stack thousands of tons of crystalline quartz? And more importantly, why would they do it? When the sun hits this structure at a certain angle, it does not just reflect the light. It creates a spectacle that looks like something out of a big-budget science fiction movie. The whole pyramid seems to glow from the inside out, casting rainbows across the valley that stretch for miles. Some researchers believe this was not just for show. They think the pyramid was a massive optical tool, a way to signal across vast distances, or perhaps even to track the movement of the stars with a level of precision that we are only just beginning to understand. A team of experts led by a geologist named Dr. Aries Thorne decided they were not going to let the mystery stay buried. They took to the skies, just like the teams in the Amazon, using advanced sensing technology to get a better look. But they ran into a major problem right away. The quartz is so pure and so dense that traditional ground-penetrating radar just bounced right off it. It was like trying to see through a mirror with a flashlight. They had to get creative. Using a specialized form of infrared scanning, they were able to peer through the translucent surface, and what they found was even more shocking than the outside. Inside the quartz shell, there are a series of hollow chambers that are not arranged like any tomb we have ever seen. They are shaped like bells or resonators. This discovery has led to a brand new theory. Some scientists think the quartz pyramid was actually a giant acoustic device. Imagine the wind howling through the mountain passes and hitting those quartz faces. The vibration could have created a low-frequency hum that could be felt in the bones of anyone standing miles away. It is like the ancient version of a massive subwoofer. But instead of playing music, it might have been used for rituals or even as a way to keep wild animals at bay. The logistics of building this thing are absolutely insane. Quartz is incredibly hard. On the Mohs scale of mineral hardness, it sits at a 7. To give you some perspective, the copper tools that the ancient Egyptians used would have been useless against it. It would be like trying to cut a diamond with a butter knife. So, how did they do it? Some people point to the sky and talk about ancient astronauts, but more grounded researchers are looking for a different answer. They think the builders might have used a technique involving concentrated sunlight and water to crack the crystals along natural fault lines. But even then, the level of craftsmanship is so high that it looks like it was done with a laser. The site was first whispered about in the early 20th century by an explorer named Julian Hartz. He was a bit like Perry Fawcett, always chasing legends in the most dangerous parts of the world. Hart stumbled back into civilization in 1922 with a story that sounded like a fever dream. He talked about a mountain of glass that sang to him in the night. Everyone thought he had just spent too much time in the sun, but he left behind a set of coordinates and a sketch that looked remarkably like a pyramid. For decades, his notes sat in a dusty archive until Dr. Thorne found them and decided to see if there was any truth to the tale. And boy, did he strike gold. Or quartz, in this case. When the team finally reached the site after weeks of trekking through treacherous terrain, they were speechless. The pyramid sits in a natural bowl, surrounded by jagged peaks that protect it from the worst of the weather. This has kept the quartz faces in impeccable condition. Unlike the crumbling mud bricks of the Kasarabi or the eroding limestone of the Maya, this pyramid looks like it was finished yesterday. The edges are still sharp enough to cut your hand if you are not careful. As they explored the surrounding area, they found something even more bizarre. There were no signs of a city nearby, no trash pits, no broken pottery, and no signs of homes. It was like the pyramid was a lonely outpost. But using LiDAR mapping, they were able to strip away the thin layer of soil and scrub brush in the valley. And that is when the map revealed a network of hidden paths. These were not just dirt trails. They were paved with a different kind of stone, one that was rich in iron. These paths stretched out from the pyramid like a giant spiderweb, connecting to distant caves and mountain passes. This discovery points to the idea that the pyramid was a pilgrimage site. People would travel for hundreds of miles to witness the shadows in the prism. But there is a darker side to the mystery. In one of the internal chambers, the team found a collection of artifacts that simply do not belong in that time period. We are talking about small, polished lenses and strange metallic cylinders that show no signs of rust. It is the ultimate out-of-place artifact. Some call them moopites, and they are the smoking gun for anyone who believes there was a lost technological civilization that vanished long before recorded history. This brings us to the Silurian hypothesis. You remember that idea that a non-human industrial civilization could have existed millions of years ago? Well, the quartz pyramid fits that mold perfectly. If a society wanted to leave a message that would last for millions of years, they would not use paper or plastic. They would use something durable, something like quartz. It is resistant to chemical weathering, and it is physically tough. It is a perfect time capsule. But what was the message? Some think it is in the shadows. On the winter solstice, the pyramid casts a long, thin shadow that points directly to a specific spot on a nearby cliff face. When the team checked that spot, they found a hidden entrance to a cave that was sealed with a massive slab of, you guess it, quartz. They haven't been able to open it yet, but the anticipation is building. Is it a library, a treasury, or something we cannot even imagine? The skeptics, of course, have their own ideas. They think the pyramid might be a natural formation that was simply touched up by human hands. They point to the way quartz can grow in large clusters, but that does not explain the internal chambers or the precise alignments. Nature is good at making patterns, but it does not usually build acoustic resonators and astronomical calendars. The team is currently working on radiocarbon dating some organic material they found trapped in the base of the structure. They found a few ancient seeds and some charcoal that might finally give us a date. If the dates come back and show that this pyramid was built 10,000 years ago, it would rewrite every history book on the planet. It would mean that while we thought humans were still hunting mammoths with stone spears, someone was out there building crystalline skyscrapers. It is a humbling thought. It makes you realize how little we actually know about our own past. We like to think of history as a straight line of progress, from simple to complex. But the quartz pyramid suggests that history might be more like a series of peaks and valleys. We might be living in a valley right now, looking up at a peak we can barely understand. And just like the lost cities of the Amazon or the submerged ruins of Greece, the quartz pyramid is in a race against time. Even though the stone is tough, the world is changing. Increased tourism, even to remote areas, brings a risk of looting and vandalism. And the changing climate is causing more frequent and more intense storms that could eventually wear down even the hardest crystal. Dr. Thorne and his team are working around the clock to document every inch of the site using three-dimensional scanning and high-resolution photography. They want to create a digital twin of the pyramid so that even if the physical structure is lost, the data will survive. The story of the quartz pyramid is far from over. Every time the team thinks they have an answer, a new question pops up, like the strange magnetic readings they get whenever they are near the apex, or the way the air seems to vibrate just before a thunderstorm. It is a place that challenges everything we know about the ancient world. It reminds us that there are still secrets out there, hidden in the shadows of the prism, just waiting for someone with enough curiosity and courage to find them. And as we dig deeper into the mystery, we might find that the ancients were not just building monuments. They were leaving behind a legacy that we are only just beginning to decode. The stones are speaking, and it is finally time for us to listen. Every rainbow that flashes across that valley is a reminder that the past is never truly dead. It is just waiting for the right light to shine on it. Imagine you are drifting through the dark, cold expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, far below the reach of the sun. Most of what we find down there is just silt, rocks, and the occasional weird-looking fish that seems like it belongs in a horror movie. But then, your sonar starts pinging something that just should not be there. We are talking about a shape that is so geometrically perfect it makes your skin crawl. This is not a jagged cliff or a pile of volcanic debris. It is a pyramid, and not just any pyramid. It is made of a translucent, glass-like substance that looks remarkably like quartz. Now, here's where it gets really crazy. Scientists and explorers have been buzzing about this for decades, ever since reports started trickling out about a massive structure sitting on the ocean floor near the Bermuda Triangle. They say this thing is bigger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Can you even imagine that? Something that massive, sitting under thousands of tons of water, looking like it was polished just yesterday. But the weirdest part is not even the size. It is the material. If this thing is truly made of quartz or some kind of crystal, it changes everything we know about ancient engineering. You see, quartz is not just a pretty rock. It is a technological powerhouse. It has this incredible property called the piezoelectric effect. Basically, if you put quartz under pressure, it generates an electrical charge. Now think about the pressure at the bottom of the ocean. We are talking about millions of pounds of force pushing down on every square inch of that structure. If that pyramid is solid quartz, it could be acting like a giant, pulsing battery that has been running for thousands of years. It is like a beacon calling out from the deep, and we are only just now starting to listen. So, where did this story even come from? Well, back in 2012, a team of researchers supposedly using sonar technology reported finding these smooth, glass-like pyramids in the heart of the Bermuda Triangle. They described them as being perfectly translucent and having a surface that was as smooth as ice. Now, mainstream archaeologists were quick to dismiss the whole thing as a hoax or misinterpretation of sonar data. They said the ocean floor is full of strange shapes and people just see what they want to see. But the people who have seen the scans say otherwise. They talk about two distinct structures that make the Egyptian pyramids look like small piles of bricks. And they are not just sitting there. Some reports claim that there is a constant stream of energy or even light emanating from the apex of these structures. It is as if they are still toned on, performing some forgotten function deep in the abyss. Here is the thing about the deep ocean. We have only explored about 5% of it. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about our own seafloor. So, when someone says there's a giant quartz pyramid under waves, we cannot just laugh it off. We have seen other weird things down there too. Think about the Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan. It looks like a massive underwater stadium with stays, platforms, and sharp angles. Geologists argue about whether it is natural or man-made, but anyone who looks at it can see that nature does not usually make 90-degree angles and perfect flat surfaces. Then you have the Bimini Road in the Bahamas. It is a straight line of massive, rectangular stone blocks that looks exactly like a paved highway. It is almost like there's an entire chapter of human history that has been erased by the rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age. If these quartz pyramids are real, who built them? If they are over 10,000 years old, that means there was a civilization on this planet that was way more advanced than we give them credit for. We like to think of ancient people as primitive, using nothing but stone tools and sheer muscle power. But if you are building something out of solid quartz underwater, you need high-tech tools. You need an understanding of energy and physics that matches or even exceeds our own. Maybe the legends of Atlantis were not just bedtime stories. Maybe there really was a global civilization that knew how to harness the power of the earth and the sea. Wait, it gets even more interesting. Some researchers have pointed out that the Great Pyramid of Giza also contains a massive amount of quartz. The granite used in the king's chamber is about 20% quartz crystal. Some people believe that Giza was not a tomb at all, but a massive machine, a power plant that used the piezoelectric properties of quartz to generate energy. If that is true, then finding a similar structure made of pure quartz at the bottom of the ocean is like finding the missing piece of a global puzzle. It suggests that these pyramids were part of a worldwide energy grid. Imagine a world where power was clean, wireless, and pulled directly from the Earth itself. It sounds like science fiction, but the evidence is literally piling up on the ocean floor. Now, let's talk about the light. Several pilots and sailors over the years have reported seeing strange, glowing orbs or massive shafts of light rising out of the water in the Bermuda Triangle. They say the water itself seems to illuminate from within, as if there's a giant searchlight pointed toward the surface. If these pyramids are functioning as energy beacons, that would explain the light. It would also explain the strange magnetic anomalies that have been reported in the area for centuries. Compasses spin out of control, electronic equipment fails, and planes just vanish into thin air. If you have a giant quartz battery pulsing with enough energy to light up the ocean, it is going to create some serious electromagnetic interference. It is not a curse or a mystery. It is just physics. But why quartz? Why go through the trouble of mining and shaping such a difficult material? Well, in our modern world, we use quartz for everything. It is in your watch to keep time. It is in your computer and your smartphone. We use it because it is incredibly stable and can vibrate at very precise frequencies. If an ancient civilization wanted to build something that would last millions of years and keep functioning, quartz would be the perfect choice. It does not rust. It does not rot, and it can handle the crushing pressure of the deep sea. It is the ultimate storage device. Some people even think these pyramids might contain data, like a giant crystal hard drive filled with the knowledge of a lost world. Imagine what we could learn if we could actually get down there and study them. But that is the problem. Exploring the deep ocean is incredibly expensive and dangerous. The pressure alone is enough to crush most submersibles like a soda can. And the area where these pyramids are supposed to be is notoriously difficult to navigate. It is almost like they are protected by the very environment they inhabit. But as our technology gets better, we are getting closer. We have autonomous underwater vehicles that can map the sea floor in high definition. We have sensors that can detect tiny shifts in the magnetic field. It is only a matter of time before someone finds a smoking gun. Of course, there are plenty of skeptics who say this is all just one big urban legend. They point out that many of the original reports about the crystal pyramids come from people who are, well, a little bit out there. There was a man named Ray Brown who claimed to have found a crystal pyramid while diving in the Bahamas in 1970. He said he went inside and found a pair of hands holding a crystal sphere. He claimed that when he touched the sphere, he felt a surge of energy and heard a voice telling him never to come back. Now, stories like that make it easy for scientists to roll their eyes. But we have to separate the campfire stories from the hard data. The sonar scans from 2012 were not just stories. They were digital images of something solid sitting on the seafloor. What makes the 2012 discovery near Cuba so compelling is a detail. Pauline Zalitsky and Paul Weinsweig were actually looking for shipwrecks when they stumbled upon what looked like a submerged city. They saw shapes that looked like sphinxes, stones that looked like they were arranged in a circular pattern like Stonehenge, and of course, the pyramids. The surfaces were so smooth they looked like polished glass or crystal. These researchers are not just random hobbyists. They are professionals who work with the government to map the ocean. When they say they found something that looks like an urban center under 2,000 feet of water, it should make us sit up and take notice. So, we are left with a choice. We can believe that our ancestors were just simple farmers who got lucky with a few big rocks, or we can look at the evidence and realize that we are standing on the shoulders of giants. The quartz pyramid is a beacon. All right, it is a beacon for our curiosity. It challenges us to rethink our entire timeline. It tells us that there are secrets hidden in the deep that are just waiting for the right light to shine on them. We are talking about a structure that defies explanation, sitting in a place that has swallowed thousands of people and ships. It is a mystery wrapped in a crystal shell, and the deeper we go, the more we realize that we have barely even scratched the surface of what our world used to be. And here's the kicker. If these things are as powerful as they seem, they might still be affecting our world today. Some scientists think that the energy from these underwater pyramids might be linked to the strange weather patterns and oceanic currents that we are seeing. It is like an old engine that is still idling in the background, creating ripples that we are only just beginning to feel. We think we are the masters of this planet, but we might just be living on top of a giant machine that we do not even know how to turn off. The quartz pyramid is more than just a relic. It is a reminder that the past is never truly dead. It is just waiting in the dark, pulsing with a light that we are finally starting to see. Now, consider the sheer engineering required to place something like that down there. If the ocean levels were lower 10,000 years ago, this area might have been a mountain peak or sacred high ground. As the glacier melted and the world flooded, this beacon was submerged, but it never stopped working. It is a testament to a level of durability that we can only dream of. Our modern buildings start to fall apart after 100 years. This thing has been under the ocean for 10 millennia, and it still looks like it could have been made yesterday. That kind of craftsmanship suggests a society that was thinking in terms of geological time, not just the next election cycle or quarterly report. They were building for eternity. As we look at the data and the sonar images, the question shifts from whether it exists to why it was built. Was it a communication device meant to talk to someone or something in the stars? Was it a global power station designed to keep the world lit? Or was it something even more profound, a library of the human spirit captured in the molecular structure of quartz? Every time we find another piece of the puzzle, the picture gets bigger and more complex. The quartz pyramid is just one part of a story that is still being written, a story that spans across oceans and through the very heart of time itself. We are on the verge of a discovery that could change the way we look at the stars and the sea forever. It is all down there, waiting in the silence, a beacon in the deep. Imagine standing in the middle of a massive structure that does not just sit there but actually feels like it is breathing. We are talking about the kind of place where you can feel a low frequency thrumming right in your bones. For years, people visiting this mysterious quartz pyramid have reported a strange sensation that is hard to put into words. It is not just the heat of the sun or the exhaustion of the climb. It is a literal vibration. Scientists and independent researchers have started calling it the harmonic heartbeat because it seems to pulse with a rhythm that defies every logical explanation we have. When you think about it, most ancient ruins are just cold and dead stones. They are silent relics of a time long gone. But this place is different. It is like the whole thing is plugged into an invisible outlet and is humming with a power we are only just beginning to understand. Now, to understand why this is happening, we have to look at what this pyramid is actually made of. We mentioned the quartz before, but you have to realize that this is not just any ordinary rock. Quartz has this amazing property called piezoelectricity. Basically, if you take a piece of quartz and you squeeze it or put it under a ton of pressure, it generates an electric charge. Now, think about the scale of this pyramid. We are talking about millions of tons of quartz and granite stacked in a precise geometric shape. The sheer weight of those stones pressing down on each other creates a constant and massive amount of pressure. If the theories are right, this thing is not just a monument. It is a giant, solid-state power plant that has been sitting in the desert for thousands of years. But it gets even crazier than that. It is not just about the electricity. It is about the sound. You see, the internal chambers of the pyramid are not just random rooms. They are carved with incredible precision to act as resonators. If you go inside and make a sound at a certain pitch, the whole room starts to ring like a bell. Some researchers have brought high-tech acoustic equipment inside and found that the entire structure is tuned to a very specific frequency. It is a low-frequency hum that is just on the edge of what the human ear can hear. This frequency is actually very close to the natural vibration of the earth itself. It is almost as if the builders were trying to synchronize the pyramid with the planet. You might be wondering why anyone would go to all that trouble. Well, some people believe that this harmonic heartbeat served a very practical purpose. If you can create a structure that vibrates at the same frequency as the earth, you might be able to tap into the natural energy of the planet. We are talking about telluric currents, which are natural electric currents that move through the ground and the oceans. If the quartz pyramid was built over a specific geological point where these currents are strong, it could act as a massive lightning rod for that energy. Imagine a world where people had access to wireless power long before Benjamin Franklin ever flew his kite. It sounds like science fiction, but the more we look at the physics of quartz, the more it starts to look like a real possibility. And then there is the human element. People who spend time inside the pyramid often talk about experiencing altered states of consciousness. Some say they feel an intense sense of peace, while others claim they have vivid visions or even spontaneous healing. This is where the science of acoustics meets the mystery of the mind. We know that certain sound frequencies can affect our brain waves. Low-frequency vibrations, like the ones found in the pyramid, can induce a state of deep relaxation or even a trance. The ancient builders might have known this and designed the harmonic heartbeat to help people reach a higher level of awareness. It was not just a machine for power. It was a machine for the soul. Think about how advanced that is. We usually think of ancient people as being primitive, just scraping by with simple tools. But if they understood piezoelectricity and acoustic resonance, they were light years ahead of what we give them credit for. They were masters of frequency and vibration. They knew how to shape the physical world to tap into the invisible forces of the universe. And they did it all without a single computer or a piece of modern plastic. It is enough to make you rethink everything you thought you knew about history. One of the most interesting theories involves the idea that the pyramid was part of a global network. If there were other quartz structures placed at specific points around the world, they could have all been vibrating in harmony. Picture a worldwide web of energy and information, all pulsing with that same heartbeat. It would be a way to communicate or share power across vast distances. Some people point to other sites like Stonehenge or the Great Pyramid of Giza and suggest they were all part of this same ancient system. Each one was a different kind of resonator, but they were all tuned to the same cosmic station. But if this system was so great, why did it stop? That is a question that keeps historians up at night. Maybe there was a massive geological shift that moved the pyramid off its energy source. Or maybe the knowledge of how to maintain the heartbeat was lost during a great war or a natural disaster. When you look at the pyramid today, it seems quiet, but many people believe it is just dormant. It is like a giant battery that has lost its charge but could still be jumped back to life if we knew the right frequency. Some modern engineers have tried to replicate the effects on a smaller scale. They have built miniature versions of the pyramid using the same materials and alignment. And guess what? They have actually measured small amounts of electricity and strange acoustic patterns. It is not enough to power a city, but it is enough to prove the principle works. It shows that the ancient builders were not just guessing. They were following a very specific set of scientific laws that we are only now starting to rediscover. There is also a very cool connection to Nikola Tesla. You know, the guy who basically invented the modern world but died almost penniless? Tesla was obsessed with the idea of wireless energy. He built a giant tower at Wardenclyffe that was supposed to send power through the air and the ground to anywhere on the planet. His designs used many of the same principles we see in the quartz pyramid. He used quartz crystals, specific geometric shapes, and the idea of earth resonance. Some people think Tesla was actually trying to rebuild the ancient system he had studied in secret texts. He saw the world as a giant vibration, and he wanted to tune into it just like the pyramid builders did. When you stand near the base of the pyramid and everything goes quiet, you can almost hear it. It is a faint, persistent sound that feels like it is coming from deep underground. It is a reminder that there is so much more to our world than what we can see on the surface. The harmonic heartbeat of the pyramid is a bridge between the physical and the spiritual, between the ancient past and the far future. It challenges us to look beyond our own technology and realize that there are other ways to live in harmony with the planet. As we continue to explore the secrets of this quartz masterpiece, we find more questions and answers. How did they move those massive blocks of quartz without cracking them? How did they know exactly where to place the chambers to get the best resonance? And who were these people? Really? Were they an unknown civilization that vanished without a trace, or were they something even more mysterious? The pyramid stands there, pulsing in the silence, waiting for us to figure out the code. It is a fascinating mystery that touches on every part of human knowledge. It is about geology, physics, history, and spirituality all wrapped into one massive stone package. And the most exciting part is that we are just scratching the surface. With new technology like LiDAR and advanced acoustic mapping, we are finding new chambers and new details every day. We are getting closer to understanding the true purpose of the harmonic heartbeat. And when we finally do, it might just change the way we look at the stars. So next time you think about the ancient world, don't just picture people in tunics and sandals. Picture brilliant engineers who understood the very fabric of reality. Picture a world where the earth itself was a source of power and where buildings were tuned like musical instruments. The quartz pyramid is a testament to that lost era. It is a silent guardian of a secret that is still beating deep inside its stone heart. It is a mystery that no one can fully explain, but everyone can feel. And as long as that heartbeat continues, the story of the quartz pyramid will never truly be over. We are living in a time where we are obsessed with our own cleverness. We think we have solved all the puzzles of the world. But then we find something like this, a structure that has been humming away for millennia, and we realize we are still just children playing with blocks. The harmonic heartbeat is a call to humble ourselves and to listen to what the earth is trying to tell us. It is a signal from the past, sent through the medium of quartz and sound, and it is finally reaching our ears. Whether we are ready to hear it or not is another story entirely. The deeper we go into the mystery of the pyramid, the more it feels like we are on the verge of a massive breakthrough. It is not just about one building in one desert. It is about a different way of existing. If we can understand how the harmonic heartbeat works, we might find a way to create clean, sustainable energy that doesn't destroy the environment. We might find a way to communicate that doesn't rely on satellites and cables. The answers are all there, locked in the geometry of the quartz. We just need to find the key to start the engine again. It really makes you wonder what else is out there, hidden under the sands or deep in the jungles. If one pyramid can do this, imagine what else the ancients left behind. We are like archaeologists of the invisible, searching for the traces of a power that our ancestors took for granted. The quartz pyramid is the ultimate clue, a beacon that has been shining for thousands of years, even when there was no one around to see it. It is a mystery that demands to be solved, and the heartbeat is the only guide we have. And as the sun sets over the desert, casting long shadows across the quartz face of the pyramid, the hum seems to grow a little bit louder. It is as if the structure is reaching out to the cosmos, singing a song that only the stars can hear. It is a moment of pure magic and science perfectly blended together. You realize then that this place was never meant to be understood by the mind alone. You have to feel it. You have to let the vibrations sink into your skin and listen with your heart. Because in the end, that is where the real secret lies. The harmonic heartbeat is not just a sound. It is a connection to everything that ever was and everything that ever will be. It is the sound of the universe itself, vibrating in the silence of the desert. So if we have established that this massive quartz pyramid is unlike anything else on the planet, we have to start asking the really big questions. You know, the kind of questions that make traditional historians a little uncomfortable. We are not just talking about a big pile of rocks here. We are talking about something that looks and acts suspiciously like a machine. For decades, researchers have been scratching their heads, wondering why on earth someone would go through the trouble of transporting millions of tons of pure quartz to one of the most remote places on the planet. But guess what? The answer might be right beneath our feet. I am talking about the very energy of the Earth itself. It turns out that this pyramid might actually be tapping into the power of the Earth core. Now, imagine a place that is not just a tomb or a temple, but a literal power station that has been humming away for thousands of years. It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, right? But the science behind it is actually pretty mind-blowing. To understand how this works, we have to look at a little thing called the piezoelectric effect. You see, when you take a piece of quartz and you put it under an incredible amount of pressure, it actually generates an electrical charge. It is one of those seriously cool secrets of nature. And when you think about the sheer weight of a pyramid that is hundreds of feet tall, we are talking about millions of tons of pressure constantly squeezing those quartz crystals. This is the real deal when it comes to natural energy. Scientists have actually found evidence that the entire structure was designed to vibrate. Think about it like a giant tuning fork. But instead of music, it is producing electricity. Some researchers believe that the ancient builders knew exactly what they were doing when they chose a specific location. This pyramid is not just sitting on random sand. It is built directly on top of a massive geological fault line where the Earth crust is constantly shifting and moving. Every tiny vibration from deep within the Earth will be caught by the pyramid and amplified by those quartz blocks. It is like the whole building was designed to capture the Earth heartbeat and turn it into something we could actually use. But where does that power go? That is the part that is really going to leave you hanging. For a long time, people turned a blind eye to the idea that ancient civilizations could have used electricity. But when you look at the layout of this place, it starts to make a lot of sense. The pyramid is surrounded by these massive causeways, and underground tunnels are lined with conductive materials like granite. Granite contains a lot of metal and quartz too, which means it is great at moving energy from one place to another. Some experts believe these tunnels were like giant wires, carrying the electrical charge from the pyramid out into the surrounding desert. This kind of technology is something that even the famous inventor Nikola Tesla was obsessed with in the early 20th century. He had this idea for something called the Wardenclyffe Tower, which was supposed to be a massive wireless power station. He believed that the Earth itself was like a giant battery, and if we could just tap into the telluric currents running through the ground, we could provide free energy to the entire world. It turns out that Tesla might have been thousands of years late to the party. This quartz pyramid seems to be doing exactly what Tesla was dreaming about. It is like a glimpse into a level of technology that we are only just now starting to understand. I am talking about a global network of energy that might have connected these ancient sites together. You see, this pyramid is not an isolated case. When you look at other ancient monuments across the globe, they all seem to be placed on these specific points called ley lines. These are essentially rivers of energy that flow through the Earth crust. By placing a giant quartz resonator on top of one of these lines, the ancient builders could have created a massive wireless grid. It is seriously cool when you think about the possibilities. Were they using this energy to light their cities? Or maybe it was something even more advanced, like long-distance communication or even some kind of healing technology. A bunch of people are still skeptical, of course. They say that there is no way people living thousands of years ago could have known about subatomic particles or electrical resonance. But the facts speak for themselves. When researchers took specialized sensors inside the pyramid, they found that the air was actually ionized. That means the air was literally buzzing with electricity. It is the kind of thing you would find inside a modern laboratory, not an ancient ruin. And get this, the frequency inside the chambers is perfectly tuned to the Schumann resonance. That is a very specific frequency of 7.83 Hz, which is a natural electromagnetic frequency of the Earth. This new research reveals something totally mind-blowing. The pyramid was not just built to look pretty. Every single angle, every block of stone, and every hidden chamber was part of a complex engineering project. It was designed to stay in perfect harmony with the planet. Michael Hiesenberger and other experts have pointed out that we often underestimate how advanced these ancient cultures really were. They were not just hunters and farmers. They were master engineers who understood the fundamental laws of physics. They were seriously ahead of their time, and they were using the Earth core as their primary battery. But the thing is, why did they stop? What happened to the people who built this incredible machine? It is a mystery that has Spanish explorers and modern scientists going crazy. Some believe that a massive drought or a shift in the Earth's magnetic field might have knocked the whole system out of alignment. If the pyramid stops vibrating at the right frequency, the power just disappears. It would be like a city today if the power grid suddenly went dark. People would have to pack up and move on, leaving their amazing technology to be buried by the sand for thousands of years. Scientists predict that in the next 10 to 20 years, as we use more advanced technology like ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery, we are going to find even more of these power stations. Some might even be bigger than the one we are talking about here. We are starting to see that the whole ancient world might have been a lot more high-tech than our history books tell us. It is a race against time to document these sites before they are lost to climate change or modern development. Just imagine for a second what the world looked like back then. You have these massive glowing pyramids in the middle of the desert, connected by underground rivers of electricity. It is like something out of a fantasy novel, but the physical evidence is right there. The quartz is there, the resonance is there, and the energy is still humming if you know how to listen for it. This whole discovery is a proverbial needle in a haystack, and boy did we strike gold with this one. We are talking about a civilization that did not need to burn fossil fuels or destroy the environment to get that power. They just reached down into the Earth core and pulled it out. They reshaped the whole landscape to fit this cosmic worldview. And although their architecture was incredibly durable, the secrets of how to operate it seemed to have vanished into thin air. It is a bummer that we lost that knowledge, but maybe we are finally starting to find it again. As we strip away the layers of history and look at the bare facts, we can see that this quartz pyramid was a real deal. It was a fully functional piece of technology that used the Earth core as a source of infinite power. It is a fascinating historical mystery that the digger is helping to unravel, but we are still just scratching the surface. The more we learn, the more we realize that our ancestors were way more tuned into the planet than we are today. They knew how to work with the Earth, not against it. And maybe, just maybe, if we keep exploring these secrets, we can learn how to do the same thing. So the next time you think about the ancient world as a place of primitive people, just remember the quartz pyramid. Remember the millions of tons of pressure, the ionized air, and the wireless power that Nikola Tesla would have given anything to see. We are on the verge of a total shift in how we see our past. And this segment is just the beginning of understanding that the power of the Earth core was once the lifeblood of a civilization we are only just now starting to remember. It is a wild, untouched paradise of information that is finally being revealed to the world. And honestly, it is about time we started paying attention to the secrets lurking under the sand. Imagine walking through a landscape that feels like it belongs to another planet. We are talking about the heart of a region where the trees are so thick they practically swallow the sun, and the air is so heavy you can almost feel it pressing against your skin. But then, you stumble upon something that should not be there. It is a structure, gleaming, translucent, and built with a level of precision that makes modern engineers scratch their heads. This is the Quartz Pyramid, a site that has left the scientific community in a total tailspin. Now, you might think a pyramid is just a pyramid, right? We have seen them in Egypt, Mexico, and even underwater. But this one is different. It is not made of limestone or mud brick, or even the volcanic rock used by the Maya. It is made of quartz. Millions of tons of it. Seriously, think about that for a second. Quartz is one of the hardest minerals on the planet. If you look at the Mohs scale of mineral hardness, quartz is sitting right there at a 7. For comparison, steel usually sits around a 5 or a 6. This means that whoever built this pyramid was working with a material that was harder than the tools we assumed they had. And yet, the blocks are cut with laser-like precision. They are fitted together so tightly that you cannot even slide a piece of paper between them. It is a kind of craftsmanship that we usually associate with high-tech machinery, but this thing has been sitting in the jungle for thousands of years. This is why people are calling it the quartz pyramid that no one can explain. It is a mystery wrapped in a translucent shell, and the more we look at it, the less we seem to know about the people who built it. These are the architects of the invisible. So, how did they find this place? Well, just like we talk about with those hidden cities in the Amazon and the desert ruins, it all comes down to cutting-edge technology. For decades, explorers have been hearing stories from indigenous tribes about a white city or a shining mountain hidden deep within the unexplored parts of the Mato Grosso region. But every time an expedition went looking for it, they came back empty-handed or they did not come back at all. It was like trying to find a ghost in a green labyrinth. But then, a team of researchers decided to take to the sky. They used the same lidar technology that revealed those massive urban settlements in Bolivia. By shooting billions of laser pulses from a plane, they were able to digitally strip away the dense canopy of the rainforest. And what they saw on their computer screens was mind-blowing. Beneath the trees, there was a perfectly shaped pyramid, rising up from the forest floor like a jagged tooth. But once the ground teams actually fought their way to the site, they realized that the lidar had only told half the story. The pyramid was not just a mound of earth or a stone building covered in moss. It was almost entirely composed of high-quality white quartz. When the sun hits it through the gaps in the trees, the whole structure glows. It is like a giant battery sitting in the middle of nowhere. And that is where things get really weird. Scientists have started to look into why someone would choose quartz for a massive construction project like this. It is not exactly the easiest material to work with. It is brittle, it is incredibly hard, and it is heavy. But quartz has some very unique properties. It is piezoelectric. That means that if you apply pressure to it, it generates an electric charge. Imagine a massive structure weighing hundreds of thousands of tons, all that weight pressing down on quartz blocks. Some researchers are starting to wonder if this pyramid was more than just a temple or a tomb. Could it have been some kind of ancient energy generator? Now, I know that sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, but when you look at the evidence, it is hard to ignore. The pyramid is aligned perfectly with the magnetic north, and it sits right on top of a massive underground aquifer. You have got moving water, pressure, and quartz. That is basically a recipe for an electrical system. But who would have known how to build something like that thousands of years ago? This brings us to the biggest mystery of all, the builders themselves. We call them the architects of the invisible because they have left almost no other trace behind. Unlike the Romans or the Greeks or the Egyptians, who left us statues and pottery and scrolls. These people seem to have vanished into thin air. We do not have their names. We do not have their language. We just have their incredible architecture. It is as if they showed up, built these impossible structures, and then just walked out of history. Some archaeologists think they might have been a breakaway group from a known civilization, like the builders of Tiahuanaco, or maybe a lost branch of the people who settled the Amazonian urban centers. But the style is totally different. It is more minimalist, more technical, and much more focused on the materials themselves. Let us take a bird's-eye view of the surrounding area. When the researchers expanded their search using molidar and ground-penetrating radar, they found that the quartz pyramid was not an isolated building. It was the centerpiece of a massive complex that stretched for miles. They found remnants of roads that were paved with crushed quartz, which would have acted like a giant mirror reflecting the moonlight at night. Imagine walking through the jungle on a road that literally glows in the dark. It sounds like a fairy tale, but the evidence is right there in the soil. They also found a series of circular structures that were buried deep underground. These were not houses. They did not have doors or windows. Instead, they were lined with smooth quartz plates and connected to the main pyramid by a network of tunnels. What were they doing in these tunnels? Some experts believe they were used for some kind of acoustic ritual. Quartz is also known for its ability to vibrate at very specific frequencies. If you were inside one of those tunnels and someone was chanting or playing a drum in the pyramid above, the whole place would have hummed. It would have been a total sensory experience. It is like these people were not just building structures to live in. They were building a giant machine to interact with the world around them in a way we are only just beginning to understand. But as cool as all this is, it is also a huge bummer for the scientists. Why? Because quartz is nearly impossible to date. Usually, when archaeologists find an ancient site, they look for organic material like wood or charcoal that they can use for radiocarbon dating. But the builders of the quartz pyramid were clean. They did not leave behind trash. They did not leave behind tools. And the quartz itself does not have a biological clock. It was formed millions of years ago, so testing the stones tells us nothing about when they were carved. We are essentially looking at a masterpiece, and we have no idea if it was built 500 years ago or 5,000. The only clues we have are the erosion patterns on the stones and the way the jungle has grown around them. And those clues suggest that this place is very, very old. The more we study these architects of the invisible, the more we realize that our traditional view of history might be a bit too simple. We like to think of progress as a straight line, starting with simple stone tools and leading up to our modern technology. But sites like the quartz pyramid suggest that there were pockets of incredible advancement that happened long before we thought possible. These people understood physics, they understood geology, and they understood the cosmos. They were building with materials and techniques that we are still trying to figure out today. It makes you wonder what else is hiding out there, just under the surface, waiting for us to find it. But time is not on our side. Just like the Amazon region we talked about earlier, the areas where these quartz structures are found are changing fast. Farming, mining, and logging are pushing deeper into the wilderness every single day. Sites that have been protected by the jungle for millennia are suddenly at risk of being destroyed before we can even document them. It is a race against the clock to preserve these secrets. Every time a new road is cut or a patch of forest is cleared, we might be losing a piece of the puzzle that explains how these ancient architects did the impossible. So, where do we go from here? The next step for the research teams is to use even more advanced technology. They are talking about using muon tomography, which is a way of seeing through solid stone using cosmic rays. It is the same tech they use to find hidden chambers inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. If they can use it on the quartz pyramid, they might finally be able to see what is inside that translucent core. Is it a tomb? Is it a treasure room? Or is it something even more mysterious? Some of the researchers are excited, but they are also a little nervous. When you are dealing with a site that no one can explain, you never know what you are going to find when you finally peek behind the curtain. It is a fascinating historical mystery that is only just beginning to unfold. We are looking at a culture that was so ahead of its time that they almost seem like they do not belong in our history books. They were the masters of quartz, the builders of the glowing roads, and the architect of a world that we are only just now rediscovering. And as we peel back the layers of the jungle and the dust of time, we are finding that the past was a lot more complicated and a lot more spectacular than we ever dared to imagine. The quartz pyramid is standing there as a silent witness to a civilization that knew the secrets of the earth and the sky, and it is finally ready to start talking. We just have to be smart enough to listen. And that is the thing about history. Just when we think we have got it all figured out, something comes along to remind us that we are still just scratching the surface. Whether it is a wooden burr that might be a plane, a computer from ancient Greece, or a pyramid made of glowing quartz, the world is full of these out-of-place artifacts that challenge everything we know. They are like breadcrumbs left behind by the people who came before us, leading us toward a deeper understanding of our own story. The architects of the invisible might have vanished, but their work remains, a shimmering, solid proof that the human spirit has always been reaching for the impossible. And as we move forward into the future, we are taking these lessons with us, learning to see the world through the eyes of those who built the things no one can explain. It is a wild ride through the past, and it is only getting crazier the deeper we go. This is how it was, and this is how it continues to be, one discovery at a time. Now, when you think of ancient pyramids, your mind probably goes straight to the Great Pyramid of Giza with its massive limestone blocks. And do not get me wrong, those are incredible. But limestone is soft. It weathers. It crumbles over thousands of years. Quartz, on the other hand, is a whole different ballgame. It is one of the hardest minerals on the planet. On the Mohs scale of mineral hardness, it sits right at a 7, which means you need some seriously heavy-duty tools to even make a dent in it. Yet, here we are, looking at a structure where the blocks are fitted together so tightly you cannot even slide a human hair between them. And the most mind-blowing part is a reflection. While other ancient monuments have lost their outer casings and turned into rough, weathered shells of their former selves, the quartz pyramid looks like it was finished yesterday. The reflection is so intense because of the way quartz interacts with electromagnetic radiation. When sunlight hits the face of the pyramid, it does not just bounce off like it would on a normal rock. The internal lattice structure of the quartz actually traps and amplifies the light before sending it back out. This creates a glow that can be seen for miles and miles, even through thick haze or dust. Some researchers believe this was not just for show. They think the pyramid served as a massive optical beacon, a way for different settlements across vast distances to communicate or align themselves. Imagine a network of these glowing structures scattered across a continent, pulsing with light at sunrise and sunset. It would be like an ancient version of a fiber optic network, but instead of glass cables, they were using massive stone monuments. But wait, it gets even more intense. Quartz is not just a pretty rock that reflects light. It has a property called piezoelectricity. This means that when you apply mechanical stress to a quartz crystal, it generates an electric charge. Now, think about the sheer weight of a pyramid. You have thousands of tons of stone pressing down on the base. If that base is also made of quartz, you are looking at a literal power plant. This has led some of the more adventurous scientists to suggest that the quartz pyramid was not a tomb or a temple at all, but a massive energy generator. They argue that the unyielding reflection we see is actually a byproduct of the intense energy being contained within the crystal lattice. It is a wild theory, for sure, but when you look at the precision of the construction, it is hard to rule anything out. The skeptics, of course, have their own ideas, They say the reflection is just a natural occurrence and that the ancient people simply got lucky with the materials they found nearby. But that does not explain how they managed to transport these massive quartz blocks over hundreds of miles. You see, quartz does not usually form in massive, solid chunks large enough to be used as building blocks for a pyramid. It usually grows in smaller crystals. Finding a source of quartz large enough to build a pyramid would be like finding a needle in a haystack and then finding out that needle is actually made of solid gold. The sheer logistics of moving these stones through uncharted territory without the help of modern machinery is enough to make any engineer quit on the spot. Think back to the Amazon cities we talked about earlier. We saw how those ancient cultures used lidar technology to reveal their secrets, stripping away the forest canopy to show these massive urban centers. Well, some researchers are starting to wonder if a similar hidden history exists for the quartz pyramid. What if the structure we see today is just the tip of the iceberg? What if there's a whole subterranean complex made of the same reflecting material, hidden beneath the surface and out of reach of our current senses? The quartz could be acting as a shield, scrambling our radar and making it impossible to see what is really going on down there. There's also the matter of the alignment. Just like the Kasarabi people in the Amazon align their buildings with the north-northwest to mirror the cosmos, the quartz pyramid is perfectly oriented to the stars. But it does not just align with one or two constellations. It seems to be part of a larger web of power that connects multiple sites around the globe. When the sun hits a specific angle during the equinox, the unyielding reflection creates a beam of light that points directly toward another mysterious site thousands of miles away. It is like a giant planetary map, written in light and stone, waiting for someone smart enough to decode it. We also have to consider the psychological impact of such a structure. Imagine you are a person living 3,000 years ago. You spend your days hunting, farming, and just trying to survive. Then you see this massive, glowing mountain of crystal on the horizon. To you, that would not be a building. That would be a god. It would be a constant, unyielding reminder of a power far greater than yourself. The reflection would be seen as a divine light, a sign that the heavens were watching over the earth. This kind of awe is exactly what allowed ancient leaders to organize thousands of people to work on these massive projects. They were not just building a pyramid. They were building a connection to the infinite. But why did they choose quartz? Aside from the reflection and the hardness, quartz has a very specific vibrational frequency. In modern times, we use quartz in watches and computers because it vibrates at such a steady, predictable rate. It is the heartbeat of our digital world. If the ancients understood this, they might have been using the pyramid as a sort of planetary tuning fork. By placing it in a specific geographical location, they could have been trying to stabilize the Earth's crust or even influence the weather. It sounds like science fiction, but the more we learn about the properties of quartz, the more we realize that the ancients might have known things that we are only just beginning to rediscover. There is a story of an explorer in the early 20th century who claimed to have found a smaller version of the quartz pyramid in a remote part of the mountains. He said that when he touched the stone, he felt a hum that resonated through his entire body. He described the reflection as being so pure that he could see his own past and future in the depths of the crystal. Of course, he disappeared shortly after making these claims, leaving behind nothing but a few cryptic notes and a drawing of a pyramid with a glowing apex. Most people dismiss him as a crazy adventurer, but after the discoveries in the Amazon and the Judean desert, we are starting to realize that these legends usually have a grain of truth at their center. The unyielding reflection of the pyramid also poses a major challenge for modern conservationists. How do you protect a site that is literally designed to be seen from space? The quartz is so durable that it does not need much maintenance, but the surrounding landscape is changing fast. Just like the Amazon is being threatened by farming and ranching, the areas around these quartz structures are being encroached upon by modern development. There is a race against time to understand the technology behind the reflection before it is lost to the noise of the modern world. If we can figure out how they cut the stones and how they achieve such a perfect polish, we might be able to unlock new ways of using natural material for energy and communication today. Looking at the Antikythera mechanism, which we now know was an ancient analog computer, it is clear that our ancestors were way more advanced than we gave them credit for. If they could build a machine that predicts the movement of the stars, why couldn't they build a pyramid that acts as a light-based transmitter? The quartz pyramid is the ultimate example of an out-of-place artifact. It does not fit into our neat little timeline of human progress. It stands there, unyielding and bright, mocking our attempt to explain it away with simple tools and primitive methods. It suggests a level of global cooperation and scientific understanding that we are only just now starting to achieve ourselves. Some experts believe that the secret to the pyramid lies in the way it was polished. You cannot just rub a piece of quartz with some sand and expect it to shine like a mirror. You need a series of finer and finer abrasives, followed by a chemical polish that seals the surface. This implies that the builders had access to an advanced chemistry kit thousands of years before the invention of the modern lab. They might have used acidic plant extract from the jungle or mineral salts from the desert to create a slurry that could smooth out the microscopic imperfections on the stone. This level of detail is what gives the pyramid its unyielding reflection. It is not just a material, it is a craftsmanship that went into every square inch of the surface. As we look closer at these quartz sites, we find that they often sit on top of major geological fault lines. This goes back to the idea of the pyramid as an energy generator. By tapping into the natural vibrations of the earth, the quartz could be amplified, creating a massive standing wave of energy. The reflection we see today might just be the residual glow of a system that has been running on autopilot for eons. It is a haunting thought to think that we are walking among the ruins of a global power grid that we do not even know how to turn on. The reflection also changes depending on the time of year. During the winter months, the light is a deep, icy blue. In the summer, it turns into a brilliant golden white. The seasonal shifting of colors suggests that the pyramid was built to interact with the atmosphere in very specific ways. It might have been a way to track the health of the planet, with the color of the reflection signaling changes in moisture, temperature, or even the magnetic field. It is a living, breathing monument that continues to react to the world around it long after its creators have faded into history. In the end, the unyielding reflection is more than just a visual phenomenon. It is a testament to a time when humans lived in a much closer relationship with the materials of the earth. They did not just see a rock as something to be broken and used. They saw it as a partner in a grand scientific experiment. The quartz pyramid stands as a bridge between the ancient past and the future we are still trying to build. Every time the sun hits that crystal face and sends a beam of light shooting across the landscape, it reminds us that there are still secrets waiting to be found, if we are only brave enough to look at the reflection and see what is staring back at us. This web of light and stone is only the beginning of a much larger story that spans across every continent and every culture, connecting us all to an unyielding truth that we are just beginning to grasp.